Good morning. Yesterday we talked about the global chemical industry, and today we are going to focus more on the Indian chemical industry. I mentioned yesterday that the reason for these two modules, actually it's twofold. One is just to give you an appreciation of just how vast the chemical industry is, just the numbers, the revenues, the jobs, the investments, the expenditure. But also I think it hopefully will enable you to answer any questions that you might face during interviews, because one of the things employers will look for is not just whether you understand your technical area, but whether you have an appreciation for the industry as a whole. So, you should be able to use some of the material in these presentations, and also by going through the references. And by the way, I will be uploading these two PowerPoints by this afternoon in Moodle. So, I do encourage you to go through them. There is a lot of data there, a lot of statistics which obviously we are not going to be able to cover in detail in the class, but you should look at them at your leisure and try to gain an understanding or a feel for just how much the chemical industry contributes to the global economy and to the Indian economy. So, what is the nature of Indian chemical industry? There are small scale units, large scale units. Large scale units set up capital intensive plants, but I think one unique thing you will see in India is just going around the various states, there are very small manufacturing units. So, with minimum investment of capital, people just start churning out chemicals, and there is a market and they are able to sell their product. How many of them are successful in the long term? I am not sure, but at least there is this impetus in India to set up small chemical industries and let them grow. And there are many financial incentives that are being provided through this SME mechanism. So, the government is willing to step in and support as well. It has been a significant change in the Indian chemical industry over the past decade. More investments, more R&D. You will see this in the hirings. It used to be that PhDs just could not get employed by Indian industry, especially chemical industry. But now many of the chemical industries are willing to invest in R&D, and they are able to hire more PhD students. Our competence in this area, in this industry, is increasing, but there is still vast talent pool that has not been tapped into. The consumption in India is still low compared to many major economies. For example, the per capita consumption of polymers is about 10 kg in India. The world average is 25. So, there is still a lot of scope for consumption to increase. The outlook is very strong. I don't know if you went through the budget yesterday, everything looks so rosy, right. So, packaging is expected to grow at 15% per annum, electronics at 12% per annum, construction and automotive sectors at 12% per annum. So, in general, the demand for chemical products is also going to keep surging. So, it is going to be somewhere in the 7 to 8% per annum over the next 5 years. India already ranks 6th in the world in sales of chemicals and contributes 3% to the global chemical industry. The 3rd largest consumer of polymers in the world, 4th largest producer of agrochemicals, 6th largest producer of chemicals in the world. And the market size of the chemicals and petrochemical sector in India is vast. Again, it is $165 billion. So, some of these numbers are really very impressive. Highly diversified, more than 80,000 commercial products. If you remember, the global number of products is around 89,000. So, we practically manufacture all of them in India as well. The broad classification, and this is the way the chemical industry looks at it, is as bulk chemicals, specialty chemicals, agrochemicals, petrochemicals, and polymers and fertilizers. India being close to the Middle East actually helps in many ways, in terms of at least having access to the feedstock, petrochemicals feedstock. It is a very strong global dye supplier. Actually, India makes 16% of the world's production of dye stuff and dye intermediates. There are industry parks that are coming up, which are going to provide state of the art infrastructure. This is an area where I think India has been behind many other countries, technology parks, research parks, industry parks in general. and increasingly we are seeing them being set up. I think that will also facilitate the production of chemicals. Chemicals and petrochemicals market is projected to reach $300 billion by 2025. India ranks 14th in the export and 8th in the import of chemicals globally. I mean, that's an imbalance that you would like to address, right? I mean, you should be a net exporter wherever possible, but we do have certain constraints, for example, access to raw materials, which probably will not enable that to happen. Demand for chemical products is expected to grow at 9% per annum over the next 5 years. The Indian chemical industry itself employs more than 2 million people. Now, if you remember the global numbers, it was somewhere in the 7 million range, is that right? Somewhere in the 7 to 10 million range. So, again, India is a major employer in the chemical sector. 100% FDI is now allowed in the chemical sector, except in the case of hazardous chemicals, and that's certainly been driving up investment. Foreign investors. Foreign, what does D stand for? Foreign direct investors. So, market size again, chemicals and petrochemicals, $165 billion during 2019-20 should grow to $300 billion by 2025. Everything is growing, right? Petrochemicals is growing, agrochemicals is growing, specialty chemicals will also grow. So, it is a growth story all the way around. So, what is driving all this growth? Well, certainly the middle class, the middle class growing, the rising disposable income, the fact that as of now we have this population dividend, so to speak, we have a young population, and so the consumption is still increasing, urbanization is still a trend, and but there is also growing penetration and demand from rural markets also. So, this confluence of factors is driving this growth story for India. Of course, you have probably read it is not going to be around forever. We may have a 40 to 50 year window where we will have this dividend to work with, but after that we are going to be in like China, where the population stops growing first and then it starts to fall. The population will get older, which means that the productivity drops. So, we have a window of opportunity, but we need to grab it. Shift in consumer preferences, shift in production and consumption towards the Asian and South Asian countries in all sectors. As we saw yesterday, the Asia Pacific region is contributing more than its share to the global chemical industry. Shift in consumer preferences towards healthier lifestyle, environment friendly products. So, this is causing more production units to be set up with different objectives. Opportunity to produce $111 billion worth of chemical products by 2023 for domestic requirements, and a lot of incentive schemes from the government as well. So, there is this Government of India Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals, DCPC, which formulates and implements policy and programs in these particular sectors and tries to foster public private partnerships. It has the mandate over a very large subject area. And again, the 5 major divisions include chemicals, petrochemicals, and then administration, statistics, and economic divisions. There are public sector undertakings under this department and some autonomous institutes as well. The vision statement for this department is to seize the opportunity to establish India as a leading chemical and petrochemicals manufacturing hub by reducing import, attracting investments, using cutting edge technologies in specified clusters with the focus on sustainability, and thereby contribute $200 billion to the manufacturing sector of the $5 trillion Indian economy. So, from our viewpoint, we certainly have an opportunity to have an impact in many of these. Import dependency means you have to develop chemicals here that you are currently importing. You have to develop the manufacturing process for them. Cutting edge technologies, that's our business, right? I mean, that's why the IITs are here. So, the view of chemical industry of this department is that, again, it's knowledge and capital intensive. They recognize the chemical industry as an integral constituent of the growing Indian industry. Diversification, they appreciate the diversification as being very, very large, again more than 80,000 commercial products. They recognize that the chemical industry occupies a pivotal position in meeting the basic needs and improving quality of life in India. Agriculture is obviously a key focus in India, and the chemical industry contributes significantly to that industry, the agrochemicals, and this is also well recognized by the government of India. And the chemical industry provides the building blocks for many of the downstream industries. We look at textiles or papers or paints and so on. The chemical industry is really providing the raw materials for many of these industries. One of the sources you should look at, there was a McKinsey report back in February 2020 on the Indian chemical industry unleashing the next wave of growth. I have taken some of these slides from this report, but you should read through it in more detail to get a fuller understanding. The Indian chemical industry, McKinsey says, has a lot of strengths: outperformance as well as promise, consistent value creator. The worldwide trends are such that India is going to have some near-term opportunities for chemical companies, and the prioritization and tapping this potential is important. You cannot just assume it's going to fall into your lap. You have to go and grab these opportunities as they come up. The Indian chemical industry has a very positive image as a value creator with a very positive outlook. It's a global outperformer in terms of returns to shareholders, attractive hub for chemical companies. That's good because it's going to drive more investments. People like to see that they are investing in an industry that's consistently outperforming its competitors on a global scale. So again, the outlook is very promising. I won't go through the numbers here, but do read through them. What are the trends that are shaping the opportunities for industry? The global oil and gas majors are now turning their sights to downstream chemical opportunities, and this can help India because of its focus on petrochemicals. China is undergoing its own problems, and that's going to help India, bottom line. Trade conflicts, between China and the Western world is going to again increasingly position India as a major trading partner. So, chemicals are obviously considered key constituents to a global economy. So many companies would now rather do business with India, even with all its inefficiencies, rather than with China, even with its efficiencies. Digital technology is increasingly making its presence felt in the chemical industry, and India is obviously well ahead of the world in that particular context. Sustainability is again becoming an imperative, and as we have seen from yesterday's lecture, the chemical industry has been well ahead of that in terms of incorporating sustainability into their manufacturing processes. So chemicals are a significant part of India's overall trade flow, consistently ranking third in imports and fourth in exports for the past 5 years, which leads to a deficit. There is a chemical trade deficit of $15 billion, which can be addressed, which should be addressed by building more self-efficiency, and also by ramping up exports in select areas, particularly specialty chemicals, where there is an opportunity for us to grow. I think bulk chemicals is an area where India is very good, but the profit margins are very slim. So you're not going to add a lot of value. But specialty chemicals, the volumes may be lower, but the profit margins are much higher. And there is an increasing demand for these specialty chemicals around the world, particularly again as we go to green manufacturing, which requires specialty chemicals to be used. So what are the priorities for the Indian chemical industry? Accelerate to build an at-scale business and take advantages of economies of scale. We can manufacture in very large quantities, and so that gives us an advantage that many of the smaller countries may not have. Digital and analytics, one of our core strengths, and can we do, for example, precision agriculture or data-driven manufacturing, and really leverage the strength that we have in this whole area of data science, AI, IoT, and so on. Pursuit of sustainability beyond compliance requirements, that's very important. Actively working with the government. There's two views of the government. One is as an impediment, and the other is as a support mechanism. And we are much better off leveraging government as a supporting partner rather than an impediment. And I think the Indian chemical industry has actually been quite successful in forming meaningful partnerships with the Government of India and bringing them in as a partner rather than as a roadblock. FICCI has produced a report and they have said that, again, there is significant growth in India, and some of the major growth drivers that they have identified are just the structural advantages, high domestic consumption, the diversification, and promising export potential. So, again, all these present windows of opportunity, but you have to be able to jump through these windows and grab them. So, what is helping this growth? Government of India policies as well as other initiatives. The government has been facilitating investment in the chemical sector, and there are many other initiatives that the government has introduced to not only increase domestic investments, but also foreign investments as well. And there are also tax reductions, duty reductions, which are all helping the chemical industry thrive. The way the industry is segmented, as we saw earlier, bulk chemicals, specialty chemicals, agrochemicals, petrochemicals, and fertilizers. So, the bulk chemicals is what we normally have associated in the past with chemical industry, organic chemicals, inorganic chemicals. But the specialty chemicals, also known as performance chemicals, as I mentioned earlier, low volume but high value, they are derived from the basic chemicals, but are sold because they have a special functionality that is that people want. So, paints, adhesives, electronic chemicals, and so on are examples of these specialty chemicals. Agrochemicals are chemicals that are used in agriculture. So, for crop protection and just enhanced, for example, nano fertilizers. Huge game changer in terms of increasing the output from agricultural lands. The chemical industry will drive that. Petrochemicals, of course, products derived from petroleum, olefins, aromatics, and fertilizers. Of the 5, bulk chemicals is the largest market, followed by agro and then specialty. But in terms of potential for growth, specialty chemicals is the fastest growing, followed by bulk chemicals. I am not going to go through this in detail. FICCI has produced a very detailed report on the Indian chemical industry, breaking it up into these various segments: the organic industry, inorganic industry, bulk chemical industry, identifying challenge. In each of these segments, I have identified the key challenges as well as the key opportunities. Similarly, for the specialty chemical industry, they have identified key trends, key challenges, and opportunities. The agrochemical industry, again, they have gone through in detail and identified opportunities. Just as an example, we can go through this. The agro industry being so crucial to India's economy, anything that the chemical industry can do to impact that in a positive way will be a huge asset for India. So, agrochemicals are substances that are manufactured through chemical or biochemical processes containing the active ingredient in a prescribed concentration along with other materials which improve its performance and increase safety. So, it is a definition of what is an agrochemical. Typically, these chemicals are diluted with water and then applied in recommended doses. Fertilizer is different, right? Fertilizer can be applied in either dry form or increasingly in liquid form, particularly as you go to nano fertilizers, they cannot be injected in a dry form. So, they are used as liquid fertilizers. The categories of agrochemicals are insecticide, fungicides, herbicides, biopesticides, and plant growth regulators. India is the 4th largest producer of crop protection chemicals globally after US, Japan, and China. It is a significant industry for the Indian economy and accounts for 3% of the total chemicals market. Again, big opportunities for growth in this sector. The Indian fertilizer industry, chemical fertilizers do play a major role. Obviously, they have played a vital role in India's green revolution, and they are the backbone behind India's self-reliance in food grain production, which has been achieved in the last few decades. Increase in fertilizer consumption is the reason for sustainable production of food grains in the country. We haven't had a shortage of food grains in forever, right? Probably as long as you can remember. Fertilizers have had a lot to do with it. Because we have limited land resources and an increasing population. So you cannot just rest on organic farming. Sounds good, but it's not going to feed an entire country of a billion plus people. The only way to attain food security is to increase yield, crop yield. And that requires the use of fertilizers. It requires scientific use of fertilizers. And increasingly, it requires kind of an optimized use of fertilizers and other chemicals, which is why the smart agriculture or precision agriculture is increasingly gaining in popularity. Because a lot of the chemicals that we use in agriculture really don't get consumed. Much of it runs off. So if you can actually monitor your soil, monitor your plants, and feed chemicals only at the required doses at the required locations, you can obviously conserve and reduce the amount of chemical consumption while at the same time driving yield in your plantations. So India is one of the major regions contributing to rising fertilizer demand, led by a rise in phosphorus and potash consumption. The government again has stepped in, right? They have guaranteed this minimum price for fertilizers, and that's driving the demand from the farmer side. It's a bit of a problem for the manufacturers of fertilizers and crop chemicals, but they don't have much choice in that. So the advantage is the government kind of guarantees income for them as well. So it's not as high as it could be, but then they are not entirely dependent on the vagaries of the market either. So they're okay with it, but many of the agro companies don't make their profits through fertilizers anymore. They make them more through the specialty chemicals and nutrient chemicals, crop protectant chemicals, and so on. So the key trends in our agrochemical industry are focus on developing environmentally safe pesticides, focus by larger companies on brand building by conducting awareness camps for farmers, providing complete solutions. For example, you may have heard of Coromandel Fertilizers, Coromandel International. They have these centers all over the place where they actually provide counseling to farmers. You can walk in there and you basically get solutions to what are your challenges, and they'll have experts there who can talk to you about what you need to do. So they don't just sell fertilizers anymore. They don't just sell agrochemicals. They give you at least they let you access the knowledge that you need in order to deploy these chemicals in the most optimum manner. And also this whole retail business is now again becoming a knowledge driven business. Farmers just don't want to walk in and buy something off the shelf. They want somebody to tell them what is the best chemical for their particular whatever they're trying to grow, and how should it be managed, how should it be optimized, how can they get maximum returns with minimum investment, and so on. So the technology trends that are expected in the agro industry: increased R&D for development of new molecules, low dosage, high potency molecules, focus on R&D in biopesticide segment because of the requirement for environmentally safe products. I think this whole area of smart or precision agriculture is one that's very fertile for chemical engineers, but I don't think we have as large a presence in it as we should. Even in IIT Madras, for example, agriculture is not one of the focus areas. In fact, I think only one of the IITs, IIT Kharagpur, I think, has a Department of Agriculture. I think it's a great opportunity for chemical engineers, and you should keep your eyes open for opportunities in this agro sector. It's fast growing, and it's becoming increasingly smart, which means that we can use a lot of our data science, AI kind of training to have an impact in this area. So I think of all the emerging areas, I would say that smart agriculture is one that chemical engineers should really target and try to have a massive presence. What are some of the challenges for the agrochemical industry? The regulations are very stringent. Low focus on R&D by domestic manufacturers due to high cost, lack of education and awareness among farmers, lack of efficient distribution systems, products that are not genuine, long gestation period for new products. These are all obstacles, but I think that none of them is such that it cannot be overcome with concentrated effort. The opportunities are, currently there is low consumption of pesticides in India. It can be grown. Export opportunities. Right now, India is the 13th largest exporter of pesticides. Most of these are off-patent products, and most of our exports are to Brazil, USA, France, and Netherlands. So clearly, you can grow this. Growth in generic products is a key opportunity. India is considered one of the major markets for producing generics, right? And it's certainly in pharma. Maybe in agro also, we can have an equally strong presence as a generic manufacturer. Growth in herbicides and fungicides also presents us with an opportunity. So similarly, there's a report on the petrochemical industry. I will upload this for you to read through. The pharma industry, I think probably next to agro, I would say pharma is where chemical engineers are not present in sufficiently large numbers, and we should be. The whole area of bio/pharma, the linkage there is quite strong. So the Indian pharma industry was at $12 billion in 2013, primarily driven by exports. We export drugs to more than 200 countries and vaccines and biopharma products to about 150 countries. Globally, we rank third in volume and in volume of sales, and 14th in terms of actual value of sales. The pharma industry has top 10 companies contributing to 41% of the total sales. The next 10, 22%, and the remaining to 37%. Urban regions contribute to about 60% of the total sales, and the rest of the country to about 40%. What are the opportunities here? I think the product portfolio can be expanded. Customer specific solutions can be developed and delivered. Operational capability can be improved. Joint ventures, mergers and acquisitions can be looked at. Organizational agility, the pharma industry is one that moves fast, even though the regulations require that any new product that you develop can take up to 10 years to actually reach the market. But that does not mean that during those 10 years you do not do anything, right? You just wait for the product to be approved. There is a constant demand for developing these new molecules, the new chemistries, the new products that will address some emerging need. And so, as we saw during the pandemic, right, I think the Indian pharma industry was amazingly agile in terms of coming up with a vaccine well ahead of many of the Western countries, and getting the qualifications done and getting the implementation rolled out. I think it's an amazing success story, and it shows that our pharma industry is capable of a lot. But it should not be only driven by emergencies. It is something that we should be able to do in our sleep, so to speak. So agility is a very important thing for a pharma organization. So back in 2014, these were identified as the top 10 chemical companies: Tata Chemicals, United Phosphorus Limited, BASF, India Glycols, Pidilite Industries, Vikas WSP, Philips Carbon Black Limited, Gujarat Heavy Chemicals, Aarti Industries, and Gujarat Alkalis and Chemicals Limited. How many of these have you heard of? I haven't heard of too many of them. Tata Chemicals, BASF, but the others seem to be fairly localized companies, but apparently they are big manufacturers. And these are the top petrochemical companies. I think this we are more familiar with: Reliance Industries, IOCL, Haldia Petrochem, GAIL, and so on. So what are some of the key trends in the chemical industry? There's a focus in India on sustainable development, which is good. Indian chemical companies are largely investing in innovative solutions to find appropriate answers to the challenges that have been identified. There are many successful examples. The chemical industry is in the forefront of offering new products according to market requirements. I think that the chemical industry is one that is viewed as being particularly market sensitive, maybe again because it needs to be so in order to survive. But whatever the reason, the chemical industry is quite agile in terms of meeting customer demands as they change. So, some of the key trends that FICCI has identified is Western companies want to expand in Asia. Commodity companies want to enter into the specialty market because of the higher profit margins. Many regulations are coming up in other countries which will increase the cost of production and therefore direct more manufacturing towards India. US could become a major processing hub, and so Asian producers will have to look at innovative ways to remain competitive. US has suddenly found a lot of reserves, right? So, they have suddenly become a net exporter rather than an importer. Petrochemicals industry could face reduced margins due to oversupply. This is a kind of a periodic thing, there's cycles of oversupply and undersupply. So, but you have to anticipate and react to those. Increasing availability of natural gas and new gas finds means that the dependency on naphtha as a major feedstock for petrochemicals will go down, and ethane in particular will be looked at increasingly as a feedstock material. So, where are the future prospects and investment opportunities? So, chemical companies in India can explore alternate feedstock or invest in setting up plants and reserves rich nations to secure feedstock. So, again JVs, they need to go out, identify nations and industries that can provide them the feedstock that they need for their business, and if necessary set up joint ventures, profit sharing mechanisms and so on. Companies need to invest in exploring the right product mix to be competitive. Explore merger and JV opportunities for technology. Invest in exploring strategic energy management and water management to cut down cost. One obvious way to increase your net profit is to reduce cost, and easier than driving revenue increases sometimes. So, there are certainly good prospects and investment opportunities. More statistics. Okay. So, that takes us to the end of the presentation. I haven't gone through these in a lot of detail because a lot of numbers there. I do urge you to look at them at your leisure, and the key thing that I want you to take away from these two lectures is the fact that as a chemical engineer, you should be positioning yourself to enter the growth markets. When you think of the chemical industry, the perception seems to be that you work with what are considered the bulk chemicals, but that's really not where the growth opportunities are. It's in all these specialty areas, right? So, you have to, I think for one thing, you have to keep up with the literature. You have to constantly look at particularly the trade magazines, not so much the research magazines, the research papers, the journals and so on, they serve a very different purpose. They are in the business of furthering knowledge basically. But if as a graduating engineer, if you are interested in seeking employment in an industry, you should be looking at the industry trade magazines. They actually give you the most current picture of these emerging trends. A lot of this is taken from sources like that. The chemical industry periodically surveys itself and publishes its findings, and these are really fountains of information about what is driving the chemical industry, what does the chemical industry see again as its major trends, major challenges, major opportunities, major investment opportunities, and you should kind of train yourself to plug into these types of areas where there is significant growth either already happening or projected to happen. For example, in the 60s and 70s, a lot of chemical engineers got into plastics because they could see plastics was going to be the big growth driver for the next few decades. Similarly, today what do we see as the niche that chemical engineers can fill, which can add value? I think in general I would say that our data science training is clearly something that is translatable to many of these industries. Virtually every one of these chemical industries, or we haven't talked about it much, but there are industries outside the chemical industry which can also use chemical engineers. Apart from our knowledge of again thermodynamics and transport phenomena and so on, which are not necessarily transferable skills, I think we should focus on developing our interest in and expertise in what I would say is the more translatable or transferable knowledge, which transcends the area of, of the courses you take as part of your curriculum. So, you have to be able to extract from the courses you take the training that will be applicable outside of the scope of that course, right. And so, for example, you take a course in transport phenomena, right. Certainly, you write down equations and you solve them and so on, but then how many industries are going to require you to solve transport equations. So, is it a useful skill or not? I think the skill that you really should take away from that is the analytical skill that you develop, the inspectional skill. How do you view a problem? How do you understand all the input parameters and process parameters that affect the output from the problem, and how do you then apply this knowledge to model the system, to simulate the system, to characterize the system, to optimize the system, to control the system and so on. I think that is the important knowledge that you need to take away. And also when you appear in interviews before companies, those are the aspects that you should focus on, not the specific courses you have taken, not the specific project that you may be doing, but rather the thing they should try to emphasize to employees is that chemical engineering as a discipline is vastly superior to the others in terms of imbibing in you these pieces of knowledge that are highly translatable to virtually any industry, right. And that is the aspect that you should certainly try to develop your capability in, and that is the aspect you should emphasize to potential employers when you talk to them as well. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are intending to enter core industry? Anybody? Industry in general, core plus non-core, and higher education.
Higher education for the next 2 years, but later industry.
Okay. Which program are you in?
Right now, BTech final year.
BTech final year. Okay. So you want to do a master's and then get into industry.
Yeah, I have right.
Anybody doing interested in a PhD? I mean, I know there are some PhD candidates here, but apart from the PhDs who are here, anybody else wants to do a PhD? It's interesting. I think PhD certainly adds value, right? I mean, it's in the long term, having a higher degree will enable you to go farther in any organization. But I think many people are now kind of deferring it. They first want to get into industry, make some money, gain some knowledge, and then go for a part-time PhD or an external PhD, which is fine. I think that's a very smart way of doing it, but you have to make sure you find the right employer who will enable that to happen, but that's certainly a good way to go. Okay, so I want to stop at this point. Any questions on what we have covered in the last 2 lectures or in general about the course or anything related to it? Okay, if not, we'll see you next week again. I think Mr. Srinivasan will be back to deliver the lectures next week, and we will have the first of our industry lectures next week. So, in fact, I think we are going to have at least 6 to 7 of lectures by industry people, and I think that should give you a very, very different perspective on everything we have talked about. And some of it may contradict what we have been saying, but that will be interesting. So, you should actually note down those things, and maybe we can discuss them later. I think the thing I would like for you to focus on when in these industry lectures is, are they telling you anything that's very different from what you have heard, from us and from others in a university setting? And we can discuss more on that and maybe try to gain some understanding of why that is the case. Okay, so thanks. See you next week.